I had questions, but it's been addressed by the chair, Mr. Ting, and I believe most of us feel the same way, but it has to do with that $32 million in financial aid that was given out to non-resident students. So following up on the same line of questioning, what qualifies non-resident students to receive this financial aid? You mentioned the information you get from FAFSA. So if you can be a little more specific, and again, we are very concerned that if the UC campuses are admitting non-resident students because they pay more, and your argument for that continued increase of non-resident students is because they help to offset other expenses, to me, I'm hearing that you are going to continue to increase the non-resident student enrollment for the upcoming 2015-16 academic years. So in the same line of questioning, would you also respond and tell me what UC campuses are planning to enroll more non-resident students in the upcoming election, the admission cycle?
I would say that it is likely that most of our campuses will enroll more non-resident undergraduates. They will admit more non-resident undergraduates for fall of 15. Those numbers are frozen at Berkeley and LA, so they will not admit more. And there's a small amount of growth that's going to be permitted at San Diego. Whether the campuses have the applications to achieve that growth, and whether the students, students have to meet our admissions requirements at each campus, obviously. So it's hard to say how many there will be, but I would expect that they will be more on most campuses, except not Berkeley and UCLA.
By admitting more non-resident students, we are doing it at the expense of our resident students. And we're talking about giving accessibility for our resident students. And by doing it, there's got to be a cap here. You can only admit so many students each academic year. And if you're giving that quota to more non-resident students, we are basically taking away the opportunity for our resident students to have the UC quality educational experience. That's what I'm concerned about, and we're talking about when we're asking you to increase the number of students that can be admitted in the upcoming school year, you're talking about the inability or your concerns about not having enough faculty members to accommodate the increased number of students that will be enrolled. At some point, you need to be thinking ahead and address those issues and be prepared. There's got to be a quality pool of faculty available that you need to be able to accommodate all those. And these have
that's absolutely right. And our challenge has been that we have not been able to plan very well for the future because we haven't known the level of enrollment funding that we would have from the state. So as I explained at the last hearing, and I think this may have been before you came in, so I apologize for that, it's easy to see growth in non-residents combined with flat enrollment of California residents and think that those two things have a cause and effect, but they don't. What is controlling the number of California residents that we admit is the number of students for whom we are funded, and we have not been funded for enrollment growth in many years. What is controlling the number of students from non-residents that we admit, we don't have that cap because they pay their full freight and way more than that. So we don't have a financial constraint when it comes to enrolling non-residents. We do have a financial constraint when it comes to enrolling residents. Now, we've been able to enroll more California residents because of the additional funding that we receive from the non-residents, but it's not as if we weren't growing at the non-resident level, we would be able to admit more residents. What's constraining our ability to admit more residents is funding.
So instead of just just asking this body and the state to provide you with more money so you can enroll more students. I think this is why we're having these hearings here, to make you think about different ways that you can probably cut costs from one place and then just try to use it so that you can enroll more. And I see it right here. We're discussing it. If you were to use the state pensionable salary cap based on the state formula instead of the IRS, you said it right here in the analysis. UC's pension costs could be reduced by $255.3 million or 17%. We have some money that we can find right here.
Yeah, and so, in 27 years when that money becomes available. Yeah. I mean, you understand that it's not money we're going to save now. I mean, and I want to be clear, we're looking very seriously at the PEPRA issue, but it's not going to solve our immediate problems. I think there are other reasons to look at the PEPRA issue, and I think that's what especially Mr. Ting was pointing out earlier.
But I do think that we should, and it's incumbent on us to look at every single thing we can do. I mean, we had this Working Smarter initiative over the last 5 years. We've realized $660 million of savings. We're starting to expand that to work with CSU on areas that we can work together on procurement, on energy, and other asset management. I do agree with you that we have to do everything we can, because every dollar we free up is money that we can put into the academic mission, either more students or bringing on faculty and graduate students.
Thank you. Assembly member, first, Department of Finance wanted to jump in real quick.
I think this, I wanted to go back to a comment Mr. Brostrom made earlier, that it's very clear how much revenue the university collects from a non-resident student. What isn't very clear, because we don't have the data currently, is how much it actually costs, how much the university is actually spending, and tools like activity-based costing that was referenced earlier would help to get some of that additional data, which could help us kind of figure out, are non-resident students, to what extent are non-resident students actually subsidizing other operations?
Okay. I'm going to come back at the end to this as well. Mr. O'Donnell?
Thank you, and thank you for being here today. And I, too, have concerns about the $32 million. But let me kind of go to another topic that was broached earlier. One of the governor's concerns, and I think I share it for sure, and I'm sure others do, is getting students out of the UC system as quick as possible. And the topic of summer school was lightly broached earlier. Can you tell me how your summer school operates? I know when I went to the CSU, it was operated through an extension program. It was almost like a third party. It was extremely expensive. And, in my mind, it was always kind of like a big moneymaker for the university. And they'd have these extension courses would be offered almost, again, by a third party. And, very expensive, not at all consistent with what a semester class would cost on a comparative basis. How does the UC operate its summer school operations?
You want to answer that?
You're right. They are run by a separate dean, and it's run as its own profit and loss center. So they are expected to break even. They often, in recent years, have been trying to identify bottleneck courses, things that they can use to move students through more efficiently. We had a big upsurge in terms of enrollment, probably in the mid part of the last decade, and that has sort of plateaued. One of the biggest elements, as you identified, is that there is no financial aid. There's institutional aid, but there's no federal aid. So for a lot of California students, 40+% are Pell Grant recipients. It's much more expensive for them. We are experimenting with other ways to provide price breaks. San Diego, for example, is going to provide cuts in their housing costs to try to keep more students on campus. Housing tends to be a bigger cost than tuition for them. We're also looking at cross-enrollment in online courses so that a student could be home and working and still take 2 courses or so that help them move through and make sure that they're making time to a degree. Our average across all of our campuses is about 4 years plus 1 quarter, 1 semester. So, if there were better usage of summer, we think we could bring that in under 4 years. So, focusing on summer and especially focusing on online innovations and other ways to provide it cost effectively for students is very important.
And we do redirect the revenues from the summer session back into the instructional program in a variety of ways. So they're not
That's a big comment, though, because that's a significant comment. Does the cost of one attending summer school, is that used as a profit center for some other activity? Are there balances around at the university that are significant for what I'll call extension, because that's what they called it at my CSU in Long Beach? But, I mean, are these students being, in essence, overcharged for the summer school courses? Or are they being, is it a rate that is consistent with delivering that specific service?
Go ahead.
It's definitely what it costs to deliver the service.
But it's the same tuition as it would be in the fall. It's not. We have extension programs that are separate. And this is not. Yeah, the summer session is the same cost as it would be for another quarter.
It is? Okay, so it's consistent with the cost of a class in duration last a quarter. Okay. Thank you. And I'm just going to make a comment, Mr. Chair. I think the ask of $100 million is actually too low, given the needs of the university and our need to, keep it to be the class operation it is. But, I do think as your team comes forward, you need to be better prepared to show us that you're finding reasonable efficiencies, not shifting away from the mission of the university, be it research or educating the student clientele, but bringing forward more efficiency. You guys, often you're up here and you're on the defense, and I understand that. But I also like you to come a little more prepared with some offense and show us what you have been doing. Today we hear about $32 million, and maybe some of that's reasonable, maybe some of it's not. But sometimes I'm scratching my head when we have these hearings.
Well said. I just want to circle back with the out-of-state students, because I think what you're saying is that there are some students. Granted that the stereotype of our out-of-state non-resident student is some multimillionaire from abroad, from foreign country, Europe or China or India, wants to go to the UC system and dying to get that UC diploma. But maybe there's a low-income student from Nevada.
Exactly.
Who we filling aid for. And
there are some of those.
I guess the point is that, on the agenda there's 50,000 non-residents who apply every year to the UC. And you enroll, what was it, 20? You enroll about 29,000, and you admit 29,000, and you end up enrolling 10,000. So there are plenty of fish in the sea that can pay full freight. And we're not elected to expand education for low-income kids from Nevada. We're elected to help expand access for Californians. That's what's so frustrating. We're trying to help you, as we were all saying, about expand access. And we find these little things here and there that focus on, we're trying to figure it out how we can work in the same direction and make sure we can have seats for kids who are trying to reach the middle class, or kids who are trying to get the jobs of the future that Silicon Valley have to recruit people to come take. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I think Mr. O'Donnell, summarized it perfectly, is that we're trying to provide more than that, just so we can get to several thousand new students every year and enrollees. But we need to make sure that we're on the same page, finding things like this where we think, what, maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe we could do things a little bit differently to maximize our dollars. So, Mr. Chavez.
Yay. I was waiting.
Did I skip you last time?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm used to it. You used a term about half an hour ago when you were defined this. You used the term benefit, to bring in out-of-students for benefit. Define that for me.
Well, we think that out-of-state students bring a lot of benefits to the university. Some of them are financial, and that's where a lot of the focus has been recently. But they bring a diversity of backgrounds and experience to our students. They help our California students develop a more multicultural, global perspective on life, which we think is part of the education. So, we've always admitted non-residents, and we think that's a good thing for our California residents. That doesn't mean we wouldn't rather be enrolling more California residents. We would.
So there's my point. I just wanted to hear, and I'm glad you said it. When you say benefit, there is the economic numbers that we're talking about, but there's also the university experience.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, I noticed in your press release, because I was looking it up when we were talking, that in 2014, you had 13% in your announcement, 13% of the students admitted in the UC system were out-of-state students or non-residents, 13%.
I think the number is 13% of our total undergraduate enrollment are out-of-state. Yeah.
Out-of-state, okay, non-residents. So my question is 13% pretty much what you have determined to be the benefit, both economic and cultural? Or what makes it 13%? Why not 10% or 15%? Why 13%?
We don't have a formula or a ceiling or a floor for how many non-residents is the right number. I think that's a very good conversation for California to have.
I do too, and that's where I was going to go with
yeah.
it. I think that, and I take off what somebody from O'Donnell was saying on the offense. I think he's a guy has a good point. Come back saying, we think the benefit for the climate and the economics would best be served with, I'll grab a number, 10% of the students being from out of state. Figuring that in a class of 20 or 30, you have 2 or 3 kids in there that are going to be given a different perspective. And I say, okay, that probably makes sense. But it would help us to understand it when we're funding this, because we're doing the full experience. Because as in other hearings we've had, we've often talked about, what are the role of the UCs? You showed it really well in your pie chart. They're research institutions. They're incubators of ideas. They define a region. If you look at Silicon Valley and Biocom in San Diego, so UCs are much different than a CSU, and so there's a different role there. And so you need to come back offensively and say, this is the role we're playing there, and this is the benefit we're giving, and I would even break it out more than that. Now, the other question I have is, and I really don't like pointing fingers, winners or losers, because I think what really makes this country great is that we have a number of opportunities. And I haven't seen anything like this. Maybe you've seen it. How many of our students, best and brightest, that come out of our schools go to out-of-state schools? Have you ever seen anything like that?
A large number, yeah.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
the top group, because I was at a graduation ceremony last week, and they were listing all the kids that were, the honor students, everything else. I'm going to Purdue. I'm going to Harvard. I'm going to Penn. I'm going to Michigan. I'm going to Virginia. I'm looking and going, these are the top of the kids. Everybody's giving them awards and putting little things on them, and they're going somewhere else. So I'm wondering, if we're going to put a tariff on students in here, is somebody going to put what do these other schools, Michigan, Harvard, Penn, Virginia, what do they have a number? What's their benefit?
They're at places like Michigan and Virginia. Of course, the private schools don't have allegiance to the states that they happen to be located in. They're national.
Use the state.
But for public institutions, UC's non-resident enrollment is definitely low. The average for public research universities that we compare ourselves to is about 26%, so we're at about half of that. And even the campuses that have the highest proportions of non-residents, which is Berkeley and UCLA, they're still below that average. So, we're compared nationally, we are a much more state-centric institution than other institutions like us, but that has been UC's history. We've always been that way, and part of that has to do with geography, that it's harder for California students to leave because everything else is so far away. But
I got two conversations going here. Must be good. Well, we can stop right there. But my point is, in this whole discussion, is that in the beginning, I made my comment. I thought we were going to talk about, activity-based costs and refined efficiencies, and we went off to this, what was it? What's that analogy? On a trip to Abilene, we found out we didn't get to Abilene. We got to Chicago. That's what I think this whole discussion is going on. But just for everybody here at the UC system is that it'd be nice to be proactive, give us a benefit, give us a number so we understand it, so we can articulate to our voters. But I would also say we need to recognize a lot of our children, and some of the best and brightest, are going to University of Arkansas, Nebraska, other state institutions.
Oregon and Washington.
Washington.
Yeah.
And that's okay because hope they'll come back for our graduate programs. But this is a great country, and we have that activity going out there. So I will be supportive of you as you go forward with this. I agree the $32 million doesn't sound right, but in the same token, we're talking billions. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I guess the question, Mr. Chavez, before you walk out is, if a low-income student from Oceanside gets accepted to go to the University of Virginia or Washington, wherever, are those states using their scarce state dollars providing financial aid? That's what we don't know, and that's what the issue is.
And I agree, and I think that's why we should have a great discussion on that. But before we start, we were going down a path I think was probably beneficial. That's why I just wanted to bring up what was the benefit.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further comments?
I just want to make a closing comment that I do want to thank you for what you do, and because UC is known to be one of the best institutions, in the whole United States, if not the world, and I want to thank you. One of my child has attended UCI, and I know the benefit of the educational system that you provided for my daughter to be a successful working professional right now. So I owe a lot to UCs, and 3 of my other kids went to CSUs. So I do have a lot of personal stake and interest in making sure that our public institutions are adequately supported by the state. But in our discussion, I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that, and I ask you to please do not lose your focus on the existence of our public institutions, especially UC. We need to focus on educating our students.
Absolutely.
Our students meaning, number one, residents. While I understand the benefit that you talk about, bringing non-resident students to be enrolled, it concerns me when I read that in fall of 2015, you are planning to increase non-resident enrollment by 2,000 students, but hold resident enrollment flat unless the state appropriates more funding than it is currently proposed. We just cannot blame entirely on the insufficient state support for your inability to accept more students. And so as my colleagues have stated and Mr. O'Donnell stated, in order for us to help you and provide the adequate funding that you're asking, we ask you to help us by being more transparent, being more accountable, being more efficient in the way you approach us with your arguments about why you need the continued state support, and show us that you are doing your share of working on cutting costs here and there, because we're all trying to tighten our belts here. So if you show that you are doing your due diligence and come to us and ask for those, I think we all agree that we will be there to support that. Why do we call it public institutions? State has an obligation to do just that, and I'm willing to work with you, but please work with us so we can help you. But again, I ask you not to lose sight of why our UC systems exist. Let's educate our in-state students first.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Assemblymember Kim. With that, this is an informational hearing. There are no votes or action items today. And again, this is our last hearing with the zero-based approach. We will be coming back next week with the May revision hearing related to the UC in the current year budget, or the budget year, excuse me. But as far as this zero-based approach, we're going to be working with the Department of Finance and the LAO and continue this dialogue, and we'll have more information coming up in the coming weeks as far as the summer and the fall as well. Oh, excuse me. Is there anybody here that would like to speak in public comment?
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Elizabeth Ortega, and I'm the political director for ASME Local 3299. Thanks again for all of your hard work and better understanding UC's cost drivers so that we can improve accessibility and transparency at UC. We ask the committee to support additional funding for UC that is needed to prevent tuition hikes and increase enrollment. But these funds must not come in the form of a blank check. Funds must be tied to enrollment targets and other needed reforms so we are not back in the same place next year. We'd echo the committee's call for better reporting of UC's cost drivers, including its middle management. We believe the reporting requirements included in AB 837 can address some of the committee's concerns. And lastly, we want to voice our support for enrollment targets for California residents. UC needs to meet enrollment targets for new admitted freshmen and transfer students to ensure accessibility to UC. UC needs to raise the bar to ensure that it does not become irrelevant to California taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing no more comments, we will adjourn. Thank you.